Sorry. All right, so we have just covered these vocabulary terms, which are described right here. And we're covering lecture 2. Levels of measurement. So here's another set of 4 vocabulary terms that you need to know. When we measure things, we can measure them on one of these 4 scales. There's the nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. And they are described here. Nominal is the named variables, such as colors, categories, types, classes, features, anything descriptive without numbers. Ordinal uses the terms first, second, third, fourth, like that. They are describing the order, such as who scored the highest on the midterm exam, who scored second highest. So we can order all the students, and then that's an ordinal measurement. The next one is interval. When I ask you how happy you are on a 1 to 5 scale, that's an interval scale. 5 is more than 4, just like first place is better than second place. But the difference between 5 and 4 and the difference between 4 and 3 is always 1 unit different. Whereas with the ordinal scale, I realize I should enlarge the, oh, am I, okay. Sorry, I need to reshare because you're not seeing what I'm seeing. Okay, so ordinal, you don't know how different between first and second place, but interval, you know, between a rating of 5 and a rating of 4 is a difference of 1 unit. So we know the differences between the numbers on the interval scale. That means it's a slightly more advanced scale compared to the ordinal. And the ordinal is slightly more advanced than the nominal, for example. So each step is a more advanced kind of scale. The last one, ratio, is when values can compare to other values in real ratios or meaningful ratios, such as so if I am happy at a level of 5 on a 1 to 5 scale, and you're happy at a level 4, is it fair to say that I am 20 or 25% happier than you? Say 25% happier? No, because if we're dealing with an interval scale, okay, this is a little hard to explain. So when you rate yourself as happy on a 1 to 5 scale and you say 4, but 4 is relative to what? Is it relative to 0? Is it relative to 1? And what does that even mean? What does a 1 mean? we don't know what these things mean. So for me to claim that I'm 25% happier than you because I scored a 5 is implying that we know what these intervals even mean concretely. So I can't make those conclusions when we're dealing with an interval scale, but on a ratio scale, we can. We can make such conclusions, such as if I run a race slower than you by 1 minute, we can calculate that that may be 75% as fast as you. And that really means something because your score, your running time would be measured relative to 0, to a number that has, so like on a ratio scale, 0 really means something. It has a concrete, real world meaning. Whereas if there is no concrete, real world meaning of 0, we can't use a ratio scale. We'd have to use something like interval, ordinal, or nominal. So yeah, that's one explanation. Hope it makes some sense. Would you like to ask any questions? Oh, okay, here's a question. Someone asked, could you tell the difference between ordinal and interval again? Also, someone asked for the emails of slides, but can you click on the link that I put in the chat box? Maybe that works. Anyway, so the difference between ordinal and interval. Thanks for asking. Ordinal is first place, second place, third place. If we run a race and I come in second place, that doesn't tell me, that doesn't tell anyone if I came second place following the winner by 1 second or 1 minute. But if I, so now if we shift over to interval scale, if I score a 5 and you score a 4 and someone else scores a 3, you know that your score was 1 unit better than someone else or higher. And mine was 1 more than you or something like that. So we can measure the difference between one another's scores, and those differences exist in whole unit intervals. So we can have a conceptual understanding of the differences between first, second, third, or between measurements. We have a concept of the size of the difference between different measurements. So we know that a 3 is not just less than 5, but much less than 5 than 4. Because 3 and 4 are both less than 5, but 3 is more or less than. Yeah. Did I answer your question, or do you have any other questions? Okay. I noticed that, oh, never mind. Okay, the next lecture, sorry, so the next topic is correlation. Correlation does not imply causation. I think you know that by now. I think I covered that last course. Well, anyway, it's a really important concept, so it cannot be emphasized enough or too much. People are strongly tempted to think correlations imply causation. We prefer some causal theory over no causal theory. So we tend to draw our own causal models spontaneously a lot of times. So we have to put the brakes on our desire to model relationships using causality, because sometimes two variables are not related in a causal way. So here's two problems with assuming causation from correlation. One, we don't know the causal direction. We don't know if A causes B or if B causes A, or either. And then number two, the third variable problem is that A and B could be related because they are related to a third variable, C. If variable C is causing A and causing B, then A and B are not causing each other. They're just both resulting from the cause of a third variable, variable C. Here's an example. National chocolate consumed per capita, that means per person, correlates with the number of Nobel Prizes earned by the nation in that year. And the correlation is 0.79. So that's a very strong correlation. Should we conclude that chocolate raises intelligence or raises creative ideas, or what? What do you think?
Sorry, can you say that last part again? My Zoom
Are
glitch.
we should we conclude that chocolate raises creative, intelligent solution finding?
No, because it could very well be just a coincidence. It's not. It's just a. It's not a direct causation. It
Right.
just relates to one another. Correlates.
Right.
Because maybe there are like many more factors that can lead to the effect.
Very good.
It could be just like some Nobel Prize winner just likes to eat chocolate, or just a coincidence that happened to increase. It could just be stuff we can't even think about. We can't even.
Right. And the way that I described it here, we don't know if the Nobel Prize winners actually eat any chocolate at all.
Yeah.
So just because Germany eats a lot of chocolate and there's a lot of Nobel Prize winners from Germany doesn't mean that the chocolate is causing that, right? Okay. How shall we interpret this graph? Here's a relationship between the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool and films that Nicolas Cage appeared in that year. So in 1999, they're pretty close. In 2000, they're, look at how when one number goes down, often another number also goes down in sync. So the two numbers are synchronized. They are related. Shall we assume that Nicolas Cage is influencing people to jump into swimming pools or fall in?
And maybe if you have another one talking about the quality of his movies, then maybe that would make a little more sense.
Yes, but how believable is it if I tell
Not
you
not
Nicolas
much.
Cage is a real bad influence on the world because people are drowning?
It's like it's not much. There's
Yeah,
no way that his movies are causing people to drown by
It
a lot of
falling.
seems
people.
It seems unlikely, right?
So unlikely.
It
I
seems
think I hope
implausible.
so. I hope so. I don't want this to be real.
These are, I actually, I mean, I pulled this from the internet and this is real data, I assume. This is meant to illustrate the very point that I'm trying to, the very point of this lecture point here. The correlation does not imply causation. We can find many spurious correlations. That means accidental correlations. But how is it such a perfect correlation? How can we get such a perfect correlation just by accident? Any ideas?
Chance?
Yes, thank you. It might sound hard to believe that there would be such a perfect correlation or such a great, strong correlation between Nick Cage movies and drownings from year to year. But we must not dismiss the possibility that this is just by coincidence. And further supporting the possibility that it's just coincidence is, how was this relationship found? Maybe it was found by a researcher who lined up a whole bunch of actors and how many times they appeared in movies across years. And they just cherry picked the highest correlation and said, wow, look, there's a 0.80 correlation, strong correlation. So that's called cherry picking, when you look through a whole bunch of results and you pick the highest one, the best one, the one that looks most impressive, the most ripe, then that's picking cherries. Cherry picking. It's an idiom. It means selecting only the best and leaving the rest, ignoring the rest. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. That's funny. Someone said his movies cause people to live more likely. I like Nick Cage. He's one of my favorites.
I found out that the reason he makes such weird movies is he has a lot of debt because he bought bunch of weird stuff when he first started his career. So he,
Sure.
so he had to pick up as much contracts as he could.
Cool. Proving and disproving causality. How can we prove chocolate consumption causes Nobel Prizes? I'm sorry, how can we disprove? Or how can we disprove Nick Cage movies cause swimming pool drownings? Let's go with the first one first. How can we disprove chocolate consumption causes Nobel Prize winners?
We can have someone eat a lot of chocolate and try to see if we can win a Nobel Prize.
Yes, good.
We can actually ask the Nobel Prize winners of the year to see what chocolate they like to eat, and if they
Good.
eat chocolate at all. And
Good.
for
We can.
Cage movies, we can say, well, wait, drownings as in they're dead, right? Not like they're about to drown, but like death,
Right.
like drown.
Let's go with the chocolate one first.
Okay. Chocolate. Maybe like go to other years.
The first
where
one.
chocolate was used. Like
Conduct
maybe
an experiment.
Excuse me?
Conduct the experiment.
Yes. It's a little hard to assign people and then wait for them to come up with Nobel Prizes. So that's difficult. All right. How about the next one? How can we disprove that Nick Cage movies cause swimming pool drownings?
Perhaps we can look at previous data that shows that Nick Cage movies like didn't really relate to swimmings previously, maybe,
Or
or
maybe we
we
could search
can
up a third variable.
yeah.
We can what? Something about third variable?
Search up a third variable that might cause this swimming pool drownings. Maybe on those days it was quite hot, so a lot of people got heat strokes. Maybe there's something else going on.
Very good. By
Maybe-
finding, by looking into and locating a plausible third variable and finding research support for that third variable, we automatically disprove or weaken the hypothesis that there was a direct causal connection between the two variables initially. So if we see that Nick Cage played let's see. I'm having trouble coming up with a third variable for this very strange relationship, right? But maybe the movies that he starred in. Let's see. Shoot,
Maybe his movies come out in the summer where it's more hot and there's a much more likely chance that people go to the swimming pool.
beautiful, very good. So let's say that he's particularly active in the summer. Like those are he's just more active in his career in the summer, and maybe that's when accidents happen, right? Or maybe movie producers like to release movies at summer months when children are out of school, and then that exposes them to swimming pools more. That's a very plausible one. So we can see that the more plausible alternative solution hypotheses can weaken the initial hypothesis, or the simpler hypothesis. All right, so the takeaway message is that experiments permit proving and disproving hypothesized causality, but also another takeaway, which you brought up, is finding alternative hypotheses that are more plausible help to disprove earlier hypotheses. Okay, now I have an activity for you, an exercise. I want you to identify 6 variables of potential interest in psychological science. All right, so let's do this as a class. So you can type in the chat box, or you can suggest out loud and I can type it right here on screen. I think that would be better. So come up with 3 quantitative variables that have something to do with psychology. This is kind of a review. What's a quantitative variable?
Something that you can't really count, but
Yep.
oh, sorry, that's opposite.
Something that you can count. Yes, it is. So how about like self-esteem? Is that a quantitative variable or yeah, is it?
I think
No, I
No.
think it's like
Can
more
do.
qualitative.
I think it depends on how you collect the data. I might be
Very
wrong.
good. That's what I was missing, is how is the data collected? So self-esteem could be quantitative or qualitative. We could put people into the low esteem group and the high esteem group. That's qualitative. But how do we even know what their self-esteem is in the first place? That we would use a subjective self-report measure, which is usually like a scale of 1 to 5, which then becomes qualitative. So we could call it qualitative. What else? How many pills do patients take each day? That's good. Okay. What else? Happiness. Yes. Okay. So I'll write those down. And now, 3 qualitative variables. Okay. For example, do you live alone or with a roommate?
Maybe nationality.
Yeah. If we measure roommates as a yes or no, you have a roommate or you don't have a roommate. Then
If you're an only child,
oh, that's a good one. That's better. Right? Okay. Only child. Yes or no? Now, we don't care how many siblings you have. You could have like 5 siblings or 1 sibling. Either way, it's a no. So that's a categorical qualitative assessment. It's grouping people into categories without numbers. All right, good. Okay, any others? Give me 2 more examples of qualitative variables.
Are participants in a relationship? Yes or no?
Yeah, relationship status. Good. And one more.
I have a question. If we put yes and no into the number, like 0 or 1, is that still be qualitative?
That is qualitative. Great question. So if you measure with a 0 and a 1, that's called qualitative. It's no different than yes, no, present, absent, black, white. Thank you. That's a great question. All right, give me one more qualitative. How about, well, I want it to come from you. Come on, students.
if you have taken your medication today,
Good. Good. Thank you. All right. So next, draw a bar graph demonstrating more daily words spoken by extroverts than by introverts. And try not to look ahead to the slide ahead that provides the answer. So do it by yourself without looking to the next slide. Draw a bar graph. Do it on paper or with your finger in the air, something like that. All right, now I've given you some chance to do that. So let's see if what you did looks like this. Did you get it right? Raise your hand if you got it right.
No.
Yeah, I thought the difference would be smaller.
Well,
Yeah.
it's just up to you. I didn't mean to, these are not real numbers. They're just arbitrary. Just a sample, just a way to make sure you know how to illustrate differences between categories, because this is a kind of statistical relationship here. All right, so the difference between bars, even though it's a categorical variable, oh wait, no, this is quantitative because there's numbers here. So yeah, this is a relationship. All right, next one, draw a scatter plot with trend line demonstrating a relationship between daily words spoken and extroversion scores. And if you don't know what extroversion is, it means directing your action outward in a more energetic way. Outgoing, actually, that's a better word, outgoing. So draw a scatter plot. Just make it up. You could draw it on paper or draw it in the air with your finger. A scatter plot means that each dot on the diagram, on the graph, each dot represents a person. So you would have tested maybe 30 people, and each dot represents a score from one person. So approximately 30 dots, and you can illustrate that the relationship with a trend line. A trend line is a line that cuts through the majority of the dots. It maximizes closeness to the dots by tracing a line that is straight, usually a straight line. If we're talking about a linear relationship, it's a straight line that kind of summarizes the relationship between the x-axis and the y-axis, between the dependent variable and the independent variable, between the predictor variable and the other variable. So, did you draw something like this? If you did, you're correct. Raise your hand if you got this one right. Terrific. So I'm giving you practice and also testing your knowledge and your ability to understand and translate relationships into graphic illustrations that are more conceptually straightforward and easy to understand. All right. Another practice exercise. Now I'm going to divide you into pairs, and I want you to discuss, is causality certain? And if not, what third variable could possibly explain it? So I'm going to ask you to discuss these three relationships. And I'll put you into pairs now. Any questions? Go to your groups. All right, welcome back. What about number 1? People who eat more lobsters tend to live longer.
For me,
I
for our group, was someone going first?
No.
I think for the first one, what my group talked about is lobsters tend to be expensive. That means if people eat them more often, they're more well off. And if you're more well off, you have more money for your health. So
Very
maybe
good.
the reason.
Excellent identification of a third variable problem that could explain that relationship. Great. Good job. Number 2, people who exercise more tend to weigh less.
I think for that
I
one,
feel like
causality is certain because you exercise to lose weight most likely.
Okay.
yeah,
it's
but then there are
possibly-
also another explanation, like maybe you also control your diet, and maybe like you live in like the society where like there's a high standard that people like, oh, you have to exercise or you have to like control your diet, and then you tend to like
Yeah, but it's still like a
weigh less.
relation. There's still a relation and causation. It's just like more.
Yeah.
There's more than one factor. Yeah, I agree too.
It's like people
Yeah.
who have a lot of muscles, like protein and stuff, and they weight more, even they exercise more.
That's like more bulking. right?
I think it's
Yeah.
depend on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
metabolism
Depends on
also.
how-
So maybe but you have to like depends on the people who you were collecting data from.
I feel like everything has a variability, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For my group, we said that people who exercise more tend to weigh less. Maybe the third variable could be that people who exercise more tend to control their weight and food intake more and be more careful about what they eat. That's why they may weigh less, because it's not always that people who exercise will weigh less, because some people do it to bulk up, right?
Very good. You're
Yeah.
right. Good identification of a possible third variable. They tend to care more or try harder or however you want to say it. Yeah. Or it goes with their personality traits. Yeah. How about the third one? College students who drink more alcohol tend to have poorer grades.
I mean, you can also think of like the teenagers, they have a lot of responsibility and it's a lot to like adjust, like adapt. Like for example, you're going from high school to university can be quite difficult because some may like take time to adjust. So like it can be stressful for them and like they might not be as good in time management and they might also have to deal with personal issues too.
Very good. Stress. Stress could be the third variable. Very good. Yeah, you got it. You got the idea now. Right. Let's have a break. Okay. So let's have a 10-minute break or a 12-minute break. Come back at 2:10. Hello, welcome back from the break. Now we're going to watch a video, a YouTube video on asking good research questions.
Professor, the document you shared, what is it?
It's a activity for that I will talk about in a few slides.
Yeah, because we can't access it yet. It tells us that we have to request access.
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks.
but maybe it's just me. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, one moment, let me look for that. How about now?
Yeah, we can access it now.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right. Here's the video I wanted to show. Little 4-minute video.
This video, you will learn how to develop a good research topic.
One moment. All right. Okay, so we've now heard about some ways of choosing a good research topic, mainly about creativity, but also how to constrain your topic to manageable size. Good research questions require a good source of inspiration. So, where do you get your inspiration from for your research project? Maybe you have, maybe you considered your research question based on something you've always been wondering about from your informal observations. So, example of that is Stanley Milgram studied, created an experiment following World War II, and he was very curious about Nazi war criminals who claimed that they were only obeying orders or authority. So that was very interesting to him, and he said, well, it needs to be studied. That's an informal observation. It wasn't based on any prior research. Next one is practical problems. And a third one is previous research. The previous research one is the most common kind of inspiration, or where you get the idea from, is what have other people done? They studied something, but they didn't study everything. So what did they leave out? What they left out could be your research project. So you would start with an article that's very interesting to you, and then fill in the gaps. Fill in what did they fail to consider or realize or study? What did they not ask? And then that gives you a good project. So that's the main one. And I wrote here, psychological science is a huge literature. So you have to trim your topic down, just like was shown in the video with mountain gorillas, until you have a topic that's very precise and unique, and there's not too much competition from other researchers who basically have, like, if someone has already studied it, that's competition, because your readers are not going to be as interested because it's not original. So you want your topic to be original enough that it would draw a readership. Authors are, wait, let's see. So good research questions are often placed at the end of the published research paper. That's a tradition, a good tradition. Since we get research ideas from research already done, they make it easier by asking the important questions that they didn't answer. So that's a good practice for journals and authors and articles, to mention the unfinished business, the unanswered questions. So you can just get the questions straight from the article of interest to you, and then you have your topic. So that's a good way. And kind of a side note, if you find something that you love, an interesting question that an author or authors asked, you might consider contacting the authors for suggestions on what are some good ways to study it and answer the question that they asked. Because if they ask the question, they're certainly interested in it. And if they're interested and they're already an expert, they might have some really good ideas that you hadn't considered because you might not be an expert yet in that area or that topic or subtopic. And by maybe emailing or contacting and asking for suggestions, you're really starting a mentorship relationship with an expert. So that's a real big positive, big plus, right? So, yep. A good suggestion that came to me, I don't think it was in the textbook. It just makes really good sense. A natural progression from general to specific. Research logically begins with a quite general question. And as you get answers to the general questions, then what remains are more specific questions. For example, sleep deprivation. We could start with the general level. What is sleep deprivation? By measuring the symptoms. That's a way to describe what sleep deprivation is or what it does. And how widespread is it? By doing surveys in the population. These are approaching the concept of the topic and the question, general broad questions, sort of the first questions you would want to know when you bring up the topic, whatever the topic is. So these studies can be simple. The very first studies, which are answering the very broad and general questions, tend to be the most simple studies to design, yet they contribute most strongly to the research community, because many interesting questions spring up out of that new territory. So once you start a new territory of research, you tend to draw a lot of interest to it, even if your research design is not complex. It can be very simple, and yet it still brings a lot of interest because it's a new area. But as an area becomes more and more studied, and then the questions that remain have to become more specific and more, well, in other words, after you answer the big questions, then there's lots of little questions that remain. Subsequent research questions quickly follow the mapping of a new territory. Questions like what results from it? What causes it? What person variables and environmental variables contribute to it or increase the risk of it? All of these questions are very interesting and very more specific than the general, what is it, how widespread is it? So that's the natural progression from general to specific. When you track a research topic over time, that's how it works. After forming a research question, see if a study has been done. So look on Google Scholar. I recommend Google Scholar. When I was in school, we used to use some obscure databases that had subscription, that the universities had to subscribe to. I think that's falling out of vogue. I hope so, because I want open access. I want people to be able to research, whether they're in an expensive institution or freelancing. So now we have Google Scholar, which is terrific. Not all articles listed there can be accessed. Sometimes you have to have university subscriptions, but more and more open access articles are being made available. All right, anyway, so first thing is you see if a study has been done to answer the question that you might have. Then you learn the answer to your question. If it's already been done, great, then you know the answer. But if you can't find an answer, maybe nobody's done it or answered it yet, the next question or the next step is to look at the kind of answer you want. Ask questions related to your question may not be as interesting or important as yours is. So check if your question is answered first, and then if it's not answered, consider whether it's an interesting one, You might still have something of interest to add. Is your related question still interesting to you after you already read the literature and got answers to a lot of your questions? Do you still have a question of interest? If so, maybe it's of interest to other people too. So don't be quick to turn away from your initial interests just because you found that someone else already studied it and already answered some of the important questions, because you still might have important questions to add and important information to fill in. Then you ask, did they operationally define the variable of interest as you would have? So just because they studied the exact same question as you doesn't mean that they're going to come to the same answers, because they may have operationally defined the variables in a way that's different than you would have, or that is it interesting to you. So if I ask the question, do students study better or worse on an empty stomach? Maybe someone operationalized empty stomach as not having eaten for 3 hours. But you want to know, you want to operationally define empty stomach as empty for 6 hours or empty for a whole 24-hour period. So your operational definitions of empty stomach could provide more interesting answers and more unexplored answers to the question. So ask that question. Did they operationally define the variables as you would have? Did they consider the population that you are interested in under the conditions that you're interested in? If not, then you may have a worthwhile project to do. Someone asked if we have a pop quiz today. No, we do not. If you have to leave early, that's okay. Thanks for asking. If we have a pop quiz, it would be at the beginning of class. All right, here's a class exercise now. Find any psychological research article from Google Scholar. So right now, go to Google Scholar. Find any research article and rate that article on a scale of 1 to 5 on two things, two dimensions. Rate how feasible is it? Oh, just that one dimension, sorry. So just look up an article and tell me how feasible it would be to replicate it. Go ahead and do that now. In order to make your judgment, you have to read the abstract. Every research article has an abstract. So read that one paragraph, and then you can decide how easily you could replicate it, or how possible, given the resources that you have right now.
I've got one.
Excuse me?
I've got one.
Okay, read me the title.
Using virtual reality in experimental psychology.
All right. So what do you think? Easy to
Um,
replicate that one or not?
Well, I mean, potentially I could do it. If I can figure out how to animate, and from home, I think I could be able to do that. But I'll have to have a team of animators and programmers. So I guess
On a
two,
scale of 1 to 5.
maybe, if I have
think
enough
that's a
money.
good number. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you could do that. You could learn that, but
It would take a long time.
yeah,
If
exactly.
I don't have the money nor the time.
Great. Thank you.
Mine was whether sweets improve mood.
Uh-huh.
And I read through it, and basically they just like asked participants to sit down and do a test, and some people didn't eat anything, and for some people they ate something and they were rating their moods. And I think it's pretty easy to replicate. So
Excellent.
I guess I'll choose a 4 or 5.
4. Very good. Maybe even a 5. Excellent. Okay, great job. Now here's another exercise. Estimating the research question value. First, let me tell you, okay, so I've sent you a worksheet. Oh, but the worksheet was on, oh, right. Hold on, I'm sorry, I might have done things in the wrong order. Yeah, I accidentally skipped this one. All right, let's do the operational definitions worksheet. I have sent you the link, and I would like you to work in pairs. So I'm going to divide you into your groups now. Pairs or groups of 3, whatever it happens to be. Okay, so access that worksheet from the link I sent in the chat box and work with the people in your room. I'll give you about 5 minutes. Welcome back. Let's hear from some of you about your answers. Okay. Oops. One moment. Okay. Number 1. Well, that's already done for you. Number 2. Any answer? Anyone want to volunteer an answer?
You could look at how they maybe how they just friendly acts. Like maybe they would share food or toys with the other
Very good.
children. Something like that. Yeah.
Yes. You can measure sharing. Number 3. Any good ideas?
Maybe ask them to rate from the scale of 1 to 5 how happy they are.
Yeah, hard to hear you, but yes. Just measuring it. Just measuring depression. Number 4.
Perhaps we'll study more
Maybe you
efficiently.
can you can look at time management and the study techniques that may actually work for the individual. I don't know
Good.
if that works.
Looking
And
at
perhaps,
time management. Good.
yeah, perhaps we can do a correlation study on their grades vis-a-vis their study habits and the time they spend on studying.
That's another good way.
Or we can count how many works we got done in a day.
Good. Number 5, measure tiredness. How do you do that? Any ideas? Okay, we'll skip it. Number 6, boys show more affection. How do we measure affection?
The amount of time, maybe we can like operationalize the amount of times they hug or say something nice to their
Excellent. Count the hugs in a day or in a week. Very good. Number 7, dream. People dream more.
Perhaps we can ask them how many times they recall dreams after they eat a big meal before they sleep. Like they recall them dreaming, that sort of stuff.
Right. But how do we operationalize dream?
Really like asking yes or no, like did you have dreams that
Or
time?
maybe like how detailed they can recall like the dream, maybe, or like how they felt when they had a dream. I'm not sure.
Well, just asking them, did you have a dream last night? Or how many dreams did you have last night? That's one way. Remember, we don't have to design a whole research project for this activity. We just have to operationalize, what does it mean? What does the underlined word mean? A dream in an operational way would be answering yes to the question, did you have a dream? Yeah. Number 8, college athletes are not as smart. That's a stereotype. Don't buy into it. Sorry. Just operationalize smart.
We can just check their test scores and compare.
Exactly. Just find some test scores. Yeah. Number 9, sophomore girl, prettier. How do we define that?
Ask third people, ask a bunch of people to rate how pretty they think the people are.
Exactly. From photographs or something. Next one, number 10, snobs. How can we operationalize that?
Maybe, like in my opinion, but I'm not sure if I'm getting it right, but maybe you can like see their reaction and how they take when people ask about their salary, maybe.
Yeah. Or how about
Ask their friends?
yes, asking their friends the opinion of them from their close friends. Good. Number 11, school spirit. How would you measure that? How can you measure that? How
A
about,
satisfaction survey?
say again?
Satisfaction survey to the student.
Very good. Yes. Number 12, best rock group.
We
You
can
could do like a
compare their like
vote.
how much they sold their albums when compared to other groups or bands.
Very good. Number of albums sold. That's a great operationalization.
I have one for the tiredness question.
What?
I have one for the tiredness question.
You have what?
You could measure people's reaction time.
Oh, yes, yes.
And
Reaction time to respond to a question indicates a lot. It indicates how sure they are. And so that's a very good way. Yeah. All right. Next. Okay, we've done that. Now here's one. Estimating research question value. So I have a worksheet with a number of research questions, and I want you to measure each research question by answering number one, is the answer in doubt, which means, does anyone know the answer yet? And number two, does it fit in the literature? Sorry, does it fill a gap in the literature? And three, would the answer offer interesting implications? So all of these three questions go into evaluating how interesting the question is in terms of research value. So a yes to all of these questions would make it very interesting. Not really
worksheet.
like emotionally interesting to you, but it would make it interesting to researchers. If the answer is in doubt, there's a gap in the literature, and the answers offer interesting implications. And the second point to consider in considering whether a research question is valuable enough to justify your time and effort is to consider how feasible the study is. How much time does it take? How much money, how much equipment and materials, technical knowledge, skills, access to research participants? It would be a tragedy if you started a research project, but you had to stop it halfway through because you ran out of money, or you ran out of research participants, or something silly. So you need to foresee the demand, measure your resources and your commitment and your motivation, decide if you have what it takes before you begin. Don't stupidly start and then invest and then quit halfway, because then you wasted half of you wasted your effort and time. So make sure you know that you can do the whole project before you begin. Don't compare yourself to other researchers. They have different experience, different mentors, different training, different budgets. Comparing yourself to others undermines your confidence or makes you arrogant. Instead, just deal with your own situation, analyze your resources, mentors, collaborators, participants, time, materials, etc. And then you decide what you can do and what you want to do. All right, so you got to make, if you're evaluating research question, you look at the interestingness and the feasibility. Now you can go to this worksheet here. If you have this PowerPoint, you can click on the worksheet link that will take you. Can someone tell me, does the link work? Can you access it? But actually, let me just make this easier for you by providing the link in the chat box. So you couldn't link. Okay. There it is. in the chat box a link for you. So here's the exercise. And I want you to work in pairs or groups of 3 as I assign you. So take a look at these and evaluate them. Consider these on a 1 to 5 scale, rating scale of interestingness and feasibility. 5 is very interesting. 5 is very feasible. So I'll put you in breakout groups now. All right, welcome back. Now, let's go through these. So number one, can a full-blown psychopath survive in a forest? Is that an interesting question or not really? What would you give it? What number from 1 to 5?
I give it a 5.
5? Very
I gave
interesting.
it
to you?
5 too.
Our group
It's-
gave it a 4.
It's unique.
Okay, well, I guess I should expect that these are very interesting because I selected them from Quora, which I think I selected the popular ones. So
It sounds like a really cool movie premise.
they might tend to be interesting. Feasible, how feasible is it to study this?
0.
Like a 0.
0?
I put like a 2.
You can't just chuck a psychopath. in a-
Well, first of all, it's
Unless-
yeah.
Okay.
ethical.
Is it ethical
Contract?
though?
Contract ethical, maybe not. But if you get like a movie, like a deal with some big wigs for like a TV show, people will do it. People will do
Yeah,
it.
but it's not feasible in terms of an experiment. Because also it's hard to track people when they're in a forest. And
GPS in the neck,
no, but you won't be able to see what they're doing, right? Because you have to operationalize certain variables, and also it's not ethical.
How long the day is.
Yeah, and if you, it depends. Yeah, but I think it's a 1 or a 0.
Well, we're doing a 1 to 5 rating, so you'd
Yes,
you'd
there is
call it a
no-
1, right?
That's why I put 2.
1 or 2, I agree. Because what's to stop a reality TV show from also becoming a research experiment?
Mm-hmm.
It takes a big budget, but yeah, it's possible.
It's not entirely ethical, but
It could be made ethical if you take them as volunteers and pay them.
yeah, volunteers. Yeah, that's what I meant. A lot of people do a
Right.
lot for money.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound ethical upon first glance. You'd need a lot of safety precaution measures, like people with video cameras and emergency personnel
Yeah.
available on standby and so forth. It would
They
be
can
very
also fake it. They can also fake it, like the Bear Grill situation.
Right. So we'd call that a feasible, probably one or 2. Number 2, why are geniuses high and highly intelligent people like childlike? Is that interesting? How interesting?
I mean, it's like a 3 for me, but at the same time, I kind of felt like number 2 was more of an opinion rather than a solid fact.
Good point. Because what does it mean, childlike?
Yeah,
right?
they haven't really operationalized it well, and I felt like it was kind of an opinion more.
Excellent critique. All right, so maybe a 3 on interestingness. How about feasibility?
I mean, I think it'd be pretty easy to just bring someone in and try to see how they act towards certain questions or their like what they do in their surroundings. But at the same time, we don't really know what they mean by childlike.
Right. Again, we're limited by a poorly understood concept of childlike. It needs to be operationalized. Thank you. Number 3, what is the difference between an intelligent person and a wise person? How interesting.
Our group said 3 for interestingness.
4? Okay. And how feasible?
Also 3.
4. Good. Number 4. What's the purpose of making someone wait? How interesting is that?
Understand what that meant. Like, I feel like there's
Oh.
more context with it.
For number,
Like, what does it mean what does it mean, like, wait, as in
I
wait?
think you mean like, when you have an appointment at 12 and then you like are supposed to meet up at 12, but then some people just come late.
It just feels vague. It could be taken in so many different ways. That's why it's
Yeah.
1 and 1.
I don't like that question. I shouldn't have
I
included
put
it.
1 and 1 because I don't know what it means.
Yeah. I want to cross it out now. Yeah, I don't like that quite. Okay, number 5. Common point between all people with high IQ. Is that interesting?
For me, not really. I would give it like a 2 or a 3.
Okay.
And like you could just say like one common point is that they all have high IQ.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that you need to consider in order to find a common point between them. And like it might just end up as a big waste of time. So it's
Right.
not
If you find nothing,
feasible.
that's a good point.
So I would give it like a 2 or a 1.
That's fair. Because even though it would be very interesting to find it, but we don't know that we would. We might not expect to find anything. So we might have to evaluate the interestingness as low because we don't expect to find anything. But if you did expect to find something, maybe you'd give it more interest. How about feasibility?
I said like 2 or 1.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to identify common features among all people with high IQ. That's how would you find all people? You'd have to take a sample. Yeah. Anyway, number 6. What does it feel like to have OCD? Is that interesting? Or what's the interestingness?
For me, I just gave it a 3.
Okay. And how feasible?
I think it's pretty feasible because you could just ask people who have OCD to describe how it feels like. Maybe it might not transfer well, but it's a pretty solid way of knowing. So I gave feasibility like a 4.
That's good. 4, maybe even 5. What happens to a person after bottling up their emotions? What's the interestingness of that?
I guess it's because it's relevant.
I gave it interestingness of 1 because I feel like most of us have already experienced it before.
Yeah, I put the 2. Put it 2 because, you know, I'm pretty sure most of us have done that, right?
So you gave it low interestingness because you kind of already know the answer.
Yeah.
That's good. So yeah, that should have lower interestingness. How about feasibility?
I put like a 5 because there's quite a lot of people that have experience doing that, and you know they have like people who have gotten worse because of it. So there's like a lot of people you can talk to that can tell you about it.
Right. And because so many people have considered it and studied it, that lowers the interestingness. Yeah, good. Okay, number 8. How do so many people have depression now, or why nowadays? Is that interesting? Is that high in interestingness or low?
I mean, I gave it a 3, and just because I defined nowadays as right now, as in while we have COVID, and there was a pretty informative news article like telling how people have more depression during COVID because we have to stay indoors all day.
Great point. So we have an answer already, which means there isn't really much left to research. So we give it lower interestingness. Yeah. Even though it's like interesting to a lot of people, but from a researcher's standpoint, we'd have to evaluate it lower on the interestingness scale. Feasible? How feasible?
I mean, we could just go to people who have, but I'm not sure, maybe a 3? I'm not exactly sure for this one. I mean, I gave it a 3, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. This would, it is a bit complex. You can't just discover the reasons for something by giving a survey. It is complex. All right, I think you guys get the point. So I'll just, well, there's only 2 left. So how can we feel safe enough to really care for people with, that's a weird question.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I'm gonna skip that one. Number 10, what do you do if you opened your front door one morning to find a basket of 5 fluffy crying kittens? From a researcher's standpoint, what's the interestingness of this question?
Maybe a 1 or a 2.
Right.
One. It's a specific situation.
Somewhat like a game show topic.
What was that?
Sound to me like a game show topic.
Yes, it sounds like a game show topic, not a research topic. And how's the feasibility on that one?
I mean, we could just do it, but
Yeah, it's very easy. So 1 in interestingness, 5 in feasibility. All right, and then we can compare these questions to actual research questions in a high-level psychological journal, the Association for Psychological Science. And here are some questions they ask. Does delaying gratification matter for later achievement? Does association between age and well-being depend on culture? Why do objects appear smaller in the periphery? Is there any value in interracial contact for reducing anti-Black bias among non-Black physicians? So these are all considered very interestingness and at least somewhat feasible because they did it. Yeah, all right, good. Moving on. Every research study requires a literature review. The reasons for it: it helps you to turn a research idea into an interesting research question, tells you if a research question has already been answered, helps you evaluate the interestingness of a research question, gives you an idea of how to conduct your study, tells you how your study fits into the research literature. If you publish a paper, it permanently joins a constantly flowing stream of research papers into the pool of research, into Google Scholar. Researchers may refer to it for years. All mistakes made will be on display for a long time, maybe forever. Research papers are supposed to be somewhat novel, to add something new. Without a literature review, readers would say, read important papers and remark on what they have to say about what you're investigating before you start investigating it. Be informed. So we have to be informed before we start investigating. Before you build your house on a plot of land, you have to explore the land to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the land on which you will build. This is an analogy for surveying the literature before you start building something to contribute to the literature. Scientific journals are peer-reviewed. Peer review is the method by which the field of psychological science ensures the work meets basic standards in the field before it can enter the research literature. So the peer review process is a filter to filter out poorly designed, poor validity, poor reliability, poorly executed. So the filter is other researchers, other people who volunteer their time to evaluate whether or not a contribution belongs in a journal. So the journal contacts usually people that have published with their journal. They contact people from a volunteer list. And those volunteers, they read and they evaluate, critique, and let the journal editor know, yes, this is good enough, or no, it needs to be rejected. So a paper submitted to a journal, number one, the editor who forwards it to 2 to 3 experts in the topic area, people who have published articles in that area, maybe in the same journal. Reviewers read the paper, write a critical review, send it to the editor for recommendation to accept or reject. The editor decides to accept with revisions or reject the paper and may forward written comments to the researcher to help them to get their research published elsewhere, or redo their study if it's really critically flawed. Searching the literature. So you're going to have to do this. When you search the literature, you're going to find articles. They may be like what it's called, empirical research articles, or they could be review articles. Review articles are perfect when you want to know what other people have found without getting bogged down with methodological and statistical details, because review articles are summaries of an area of literature. Review articles are ideal to familiarize researchers to each area of literature. They're very useful. They have already, so these are published by people who have already searched the literature far and wide in writing their review article. Why search it again? Why reinvent the wheel? If you want to become familiarized with an area of research, you might as well start with review articles. Most or all important works in the areas should have been mentioned or included in a review article's reference list. So if you're looking for the important articles, the big ones in your area that you need to refer to, then check in with a review article as a go-to, as a first reference. Read it, highlight important references, adopt them into your paper. So if they cite someone that's important, then you should also cite that article. But before you cite it, you need to go find it, read at least the abstract to know whether you're citing something that's really relevant and that really supports what you're trying to say. So at a minimum, when you cite a reference, that means that you have at least read the abstract. Highly similar role model papers. Those are the ones you want to cite most of all. After you have, I mean, yeah, at least as much as review articles, but yeah, the ones you want to cite the most important references for you are the ones that are highly similar to your study, your paper. After you've decided upon your own research question and methodology, you find a similar question, topic, or methodology has already been studied. So you find that paper, you notice that they already got published. And so the fact that it's published already speaks for itself. It shows that this topic and this question has high interestingness, that it's relevant, and that it's publishable. And then you consider in greater detail, all of their references, because if your study and their study is similar, look at their references. Those are probably the ones you want also. So it's okay to copy references as long as they are actually useful to you and that you've read them, or at least read the abstracts. And then Consider their references, consider their methodology, consider their arguments, consider their literature review, because all of what they did may be very translatable or can be borrowed to your own paper, to your own self, your project. Yeah. You don't need to reinvent all the wheels. If someone's done something similar, you can copy their idea. I mean, their strategies, their approaches, their activities. Obviously, you're not going to copy their paper because that's a complete redundancy. Okay, how many references is enough references? It's hard to say. The average published article cites around 50 references. I think that the number of references, the average number of references will steadily increase over the years and decades. You know, maybe the average will be 100 references within the next 10 years or something like that. So as research grows, we might be expected to know more and more studies and cite more and more studies. Review articles cite more studies than empirical studies. Maybe it's better to not think about how many references you're citing, but instead just use the references that meet your needs to adequately survey the literature. Cite references because they're important to your paper, not just to increase the number of references. For your final research paper, I expect at least 3 references per group member. So if you're working in a group of 5, then that would be 15 references or more for your research paper. That's my rule for this year. Last year, I required 5 references per member, but I want to change some things this year, so I lowered that. All right, next. Here is your in-class and take-home assignment. It's called 3 references. In class, please write a question describing something you're interested in learning more about. So you're going to do that right now. Possibly researching that. So write a research question that you might possibly want to do as a research project for this class. And maybe you will. Phrase it in a way that relates to psychology. Now, we're going to be doing research projects in this class in groups. So there's no guarantee that what you write will be what you study. But as an exercise, I want you to write a research question. So something you're interested in studying, phrase it in a way that relates to psychology and in a way that adequately can be operationalized so that it's not ambiguous to people what you're talking about. Then I want you to find 3 references. This is your homework assignment, to find 3 references and paste those references in this assignment sheet. This is a single assignment sheet for the whole class. So I want 68 replies for the 68 students in the class. I want them to be put into this Google Sheets document that I created. So select your own groups here also. I decided I want you to select your own groups instead of randomly assigning you to groups. So this is another change that I'm doing this year. I'm not going to randomly assign you to groups after all. And I'm doing something very experimental this year, which I'm quite interested in observing. And the experiment is this. I want to give you the freedom to choose how big your group will be. So you can join a big group or a small group, and you can change your mind.
Is there a minimum number of people, like 2 plus, 3 plus?
Yes, 2. 2 is the minimum number. And the maximum number is 68. So come up with your own. We're just gonna watch and see what happens. We'll see how this evolves because I have no idea what's gonna happen.
Mr. Jason, for the in-class assignment and the take-home assignment, we do this separately, and then after that, we select a group for an upcoming assignment.
This, you're talking about the link right here, right?
Yeah, because after that, it tells us to select our own group, but then we would have to do the finding the 3 references and writing the questions ourselves, right?
Correct. Actually, I have combined all of these activities onto a single Google Sheet. So you just have to go to that link. I'm not sure if I've made it shareable yet. Can you access it yet?
Yeah, we can.
Great. All right. So on that sheet, you're going to do all of this. You're going to choose your groups, and you're also going to write your question, and you're going to provide your 3 references. Everything goes on this one sheet.
So for choosing the group, we don't do that yet, right?
You do that. You do that yet. You do it now.
Oh, so that means that everyone writes one question and all of us find 3 references, and this is separate from making a group?
Yes.
Okay.
Well said. It's separate from, even though it's on the same sheet. Yeah. Sorry for the confusion. Maybe I should have put in a separate sheet, but I combined it all together in one sheet. So if you find it, you'll see. And I think actually I'm glad that I did it the way I did, because I want everyone to see everyone else's questions. I want people to get ideas from that. And then you can choose your groups based on referring to what questions people asked. So that's the reason for it. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. And here's some examples. Does exercise protect against COVID? You could ask that question, but then maybe when you're looking for references, because you need 3 references. So while you're looking for those references, you might find that your search words are not perfect. So you might revise and get more better results, because as you improve your search terms, your results also become more relevant. So you could then start with one question and then refine it by asking, does exercise reduce risk of COVID fatality? Now, you might not know those exact words at the start, but then after you initially did your search and read a little bit, then you'd start getting better ideas about how to ask the question. So by asking and then reading, then you can ask again with better words and get better search results, maybe. Anyway, whatever you do and however you do it, there's your assignment. No one can tell you how to search for what you're looking for, because each knowledge area has its own structure, language, and logic. Therefore, I'm not going to tell you how to find what you're looking for. You have to find that by yourself. Figure it out. Search, see the results, modify your search terms as needed. Let your research question evolve a little bit as necessary to form a question that relates to your 3 references. And then also choose your groups on that sheet. Okay. Well, that's the end of lecture. Any questions?
Mr. Jason, I have one
Yeah.
question.
Yes.
Like for the reference link, right? Does it have to be from only Google Scholar, or like just anywhere? It's okay.
Good question. The reason that I suggested and the reason I strongly suggest Google Scholar is because the results that you see from searching there are acceptable for a research paper reference list. You can use those for references, and those count as references. What I mean is that they are high quality references. They're the kind of references that you would not be embarrassed to use and to cite when you're writing a research paper and publishing and to a wide audience. You want to use very high quality references. So that's why I suggest Google Scholar. If you were to search just plain Google, you would come up with also good references, but some of them might be like Wikipedia, which the prevailing opinion about Wikipedia is preferring not to use it for research article references in general. That might change in the future, but currently it's like that. And other, like popular magazine articles are not acceptable in general for research references. So that's why I suggested Google Scholar. Because whatever your results, they should be acceptable for research, for your references. All right, any other questions?
On the Edexcel sheet on where we like assign groups, what does the X mean? Can you explain to me more?
X means you want to be in that group. So
Like,
place
do
an
you
X.
put an X and then your name beside it?
No. Actually, your name should go in the very first column on the left in column A. So I want to see 68 rows. Each row is a student, and each student puts one X.
Okay.
In one group column.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Someone asked, do we have to do the research for real? You might. You might choose that one if your group chooses that one. Oh, how do you know what the group is researching? I don't know. And it's a little weird to choose your group before you know what the topic is. Maybe one group is studying something you're interested in, another group not. But we don't know what the groups are studying yet. So there may be some kind of negotiation where people form their groups and then they decide on a topic, and then maybe I can allow people to change groups. Let's do that. Okay, so for about 1 week, from now until next week, choose your groups. But next week, we will select a topic. Each group will select a topic, at which point, at which time, I want to allow you to change your mind and change your group. You can reselect and regroup yourselves according to your interest in the topics at hand. Okay, so that's my plan now. And another, Sasipa also asked why, like, wait, it says, go ask people and something like that, or can it also be the topic that can be done through meta-analysis of other existing papers? That's a great question. No, I don't know how to do meta-analysis, so I'm not planning on teaching how to do meta-analysis. So, well, I don't want to forbid you from it. if you're interested in a meta-analysis, if you're interested to learn about it, then I will learn about it to help. But I'm not planning on teaching that to the whole class. Any other questions? All right. Well, this was a good session. We nearly met for the whole 3 hours. All right. If you have any questions, just email me. Make sure you do that assignment. All right. Good luck.
Thank you.
Have a good week. See you guys next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye.
Thank you.